All right, folks. I want to know about you. I want to know what you're thinking. I want to know what comprises of your identity. And I want information. So, how do I find it? One of the easiest ways to access these things are through surveys, which is kind of what this course brings to life. I also posted in Module 1 sample survey. Go ahead and download that and fill it out yourself. No grades associated with it, just sort of figuring these things to be your own. Below, I have 6 different questions, selected from hundreds of questions from the General Social Survey each year. So some of them feel pretty basic of what is your gender? Male, female, what is your age? How many brothers and sisters do you have? In terms of your religious faith, would you consider your faith very strong, somewhat strong, not very strong, no religion? Do you strongly agree, disagree, strongly disagree that sometimes it's necessary to discipline a child with a good hard spanking? Do you favor or oppose the death penalty for persons convicted of murder? Some of them feel pretty basic. What's your age? Probably for most people, not a controversial topic. Other ones might be getting into the controversy. And figuring these things out is important to understanding the social theory that shapes what our communities are made of. Some of these questions might have problems with them. They may fit certain criteria, and it's up to us to really sort of analyze what would happen for a response. Now, in this situation, if I were to fill this out myself, I might fill it out like this: age, sisters, and so on. And I would code each of these things in this column to fit the specific codings. So here, instead of putting male, I'm going to actually put the idea of 1. For age, just my age, 37. Brothers and sisters, 1. Now, each of these things have a specific value associated. The numbers I was putting through are actual codes, so make sure to watch the video on GSS as well as the Jamovi videos for maybe beginning here. And also, check out these values, these words, which are known as our mnemonics. Instead of writing this entire question, we just put specific names that represent these questions in maybe a code book for analysis. All right. It's time to dig into Module 1, developing your survey research skill set. We'll break these things down into the idea of what social science really is, the operationalization and the values. We'll go into survey research with properties and disposition design. We'll have survey data, talk about categorical versus continuous and numerical, or records versus fields. And then secondary survey data with sort of data excavation. Now, social science in general is known as the application of the scientific method in studying people and the social world. Basically, it's taking things we think about and how people act and behave and trying to create a scientific method to explain it. There are patterns out there, just like there are patterns in the natural sciences like biology or the physical sciences like chemistry, physics. We see these things pop up in a natural setting, just like we do blades of grass or kernels of corn. And it's up to us to sort of break down those patterns and try to explain why are these things happening. We often conduct our social science research through the use of data or information, including the summaries of data producing statistics. And statistics, in a great summary, is known as the science of data. It explores that concerns the collection, so it's all that concerns the collection of organization, analysis, interpretation, and presentation of data. It's how we were to use all those outputs from our surveys. And the scientific method examines the social relationships in this sort of different elements that all try to connect back to theory. So we ask a research question, we'll formulate our hypotheses, we'll collect our data, we'll then analyze our data, and then evaluate our hypotheses. Then once we do that, we go back and we ask more research questions. It's this cycle that basically tries to give us an empirical or sort of observational based understanding of the theory we believe to be true. Breaking it down to the 6 points of the scientific method, we can see it as this. And we bring out an operationalization. Basically, how do we operate on these things? We're turning concepts into measures and grappling with the essential question of science and empirical research, aka, how do I measure that? And what survey questions do I choose through the General Social Survey Data Explorer? What would be useful for me to answer the questions I have? Based on selected measures, data, and analysis, scientists can reach the conclusions that are not swayed by our personal beliefs, opinions, and values. We want a sense of objectivity as social science researchers. We want to say that it's not my personal belief. And your personal belief may be enriched in a philosophy of cultural backgrounds and whatnot, but it's still about you. The scientists, we're supposed to represent the scientific community. But more importantly, we're supposed to be trying to explain things in a bigger, broader sense. So, for this reason, and this is your sort of first personal rule of writing, you need to avoid the personal I when writing about your blogs and homework assignments. So rather than saying, I found these findings interesting, just say these findings are interesting. You'll see this more when you go over the rules of writing for each module, especially going forward into module 2 and onward. But for now, here's your first tip: no personal I's. Now, when analyzing data, interpreting results, and reporting your findings, scientists must report their results honestly and truthfully. The scientist must remain objective and is not bent on proving anything or swaying the opinions of others. So when you're reporting your findings, ask the question, am I being honest and truthful for my reporting? Does my write-up provide an accurate assessment of the findings? There's going to be some components where you might say that this is surprising. And that might feel a little bit subjective, because what is surprising? I ask you, don't go down that train of going too far into the deep end, but more just reporting the values. And if you think that there may be a contradiction, that's where you go into further assessments. or even state this may be a contradiction compared to what prior individuals seem to believe. But it is important to sort of make sure that these findings are legitimate. And how can we do so? Well, it's actually one of the more difficult things in social science. It's replicability. Based on the steps of the scientific method, another scientist should be able to repeat the study that you did. Based on their findings, it should either verify, refute, or modify the findings from the original study. This will advance knowledge, understanding, and the search for truth, and being able to replicate your results, say that it's not just you that did it and got those things, other people should get the same stuff. This is the reason when we write up our findings, it's clear we are clear when writing up our results that others can replicate our research if needed. And then there's also a generalization. The responsibility of the scientist is to add to our general understanding and to contribute to the general theoretical understanding of how the world works. I'm always going to push for you all to go beyond. That's what the sociological imagination kind of is about. You see things out there and you try to structure the pattern in an overarching society. Same thing's going to happen with data. You're going to see survey results, and I want you to start thinking about what those things mean. Now, again, stay away from saying, I believe this, but take it into saying, oh, based on what this is being claimed, certain theories could fall in place. And this might be a logical next step. It goes beyond and sort of adds to the intellectual conversation that you all have in you. This is my favorite part because I'm a cynic. Organized skepticism. The basic scientific value, it's basically saying that the responsibility of the scientist is to question the scientific research and research designs that have come before to improve on the methods, measures, and findings. It's interesting. The idea of smoking took a while to really push for that to be like smoking is bad, don't smoke. You go and you can look at old commercials from the 30s where they talk about how smoking is good for your health. And folks who were in doing this research were like, I don't know. So they went ahead and they went through this motion to figure out why people were getting ill. And they drew the connection after years and years of data to basically say, look, these findings, we kept reproducing them, we're getting the same type of stuff, and I'm pretty sure smoking's bad for you. So when you see questions, even the questionnaire that I just showed you at the beginning of this video, keep in mind that some of the stuff might not be perfect. So it's up to you all. How can you improve it? And I prompt you to discuss how we can improve our measures and our survey questions. We're basically looking to summarize measurement validity and measurement reliability. Measurement reliability implies that you are getting a consistent response and people are actually seriously responding to the survey question because they take the question seriously. They don't want people to just be randomly guessing or even lying. This type of response bias is a problem because if you're not getting actual results about the people around you, that means your survey data is garbage. It means nothing. and you've wasted time collecting data and doing the research. So we need to hope and push and strive for measurement reliability because we want to make sure that this is representative of the population at hand. So it's okay to be skeptical of the research because you want to make sure that it is reliable to do the analysis with. Measurement validity is also sort of saying, like, did the measurement get messed up somewhere along the way? If someone said, "What is your height?" and they wrote it, and the written answer was 180. Now, if I might say, "What's your height in inches?" and they say 180, I don't think we're going to have 15-foot tall people. However, someone might actually see height and think of height in centimeters. You know, if you live outside the US, most other countries use centimeters instead of inches. So if they were to write 180 centimeters, which is about 6 foot tall, that makes sense. So the measurement may be just sort of accidentally incorrect. Furthermore, when you ask a certain question, if it's confusing, or if it's something that's not really being asked the right way, at least maybe in your opinion, people may not respond to it the correct way. They're not trying to lie. They're not trying to do bad things, and they're not answering things incorrectly because they're trying to mess you up, but it just may not be clear. So the validity, you need to make sure that these survey questions are actually measuring what they're intending to measure by that question. So that skepticism also fits the picture. Could you ask it in a different way to get a more accurate response? The survey research is one way social scientists collect data, but we don't have 5 years for you to collect social survey research. We got a few weeks. So other ways of going about it, through you can do experiments, also big time suck. And then also you can go ahead and, social scientists, they collect data by usually surveying them through self-reporting. So they may actually put the survey out there and ask people to self-report on their attitudes, values, beliefs, and opinions through the survey questions we ask. It leads into this idea, if we had 5 years to collect this data, different types of properties that go along with it, or properties, dispositions, designs. We collect data on individuals' properties, so the individual and household characteristics, their demographics, as well as their dispositions, the values and the beliefs. So properties, think about like people, and the dispositions, kind of like what their the dialogue about themselves, what they talk about themselves, what they think, or their positions in general. The ultimate research question often is, what's the effects of these properties on these sets of beliefs? So do certain groups believe certain things? Are they associated with certain practices? All that falls into place a lot with social survey research. The scientific method, operationalization, basic values of science. The survey research is a good review so far. Feel free to pause the video, take a break, take a breather, and have you test some questions, and we'll go on to the next part of this video. So, had you all take a survey? So, quick review over certain levels of measurement. We have categorical variables, and these variables are survey questions which respond to a series of categories like race, Gender, education, other things. In survey research, we can measure people's response data in these two ways, through categorical or survey questions that are measured in a continuous or numeric scale, basically. And numerical variables, survey questions where this respondent will respond with a number that makes sense to perform math operations on. Now, this is tricky because the height fits the description pretty well. So I can say someone's height and add an inch to it, then they go from 55 inches to 56 inches. The zip code, even though it has numbers in it, doesn't make sense. Or it also doesn't make sense to add a number to an 859 area code. You wouldn't say 859 plus 1 gives you an 860 area code, and that's just a shift. In Module 2, we'll talk about can we perform an average on data. That will be the indicator on whether something is numerical. And if it doesn't make sense to take an average of something, then it's going to be a categorical variable. And this distinction is very important because they'll determine the types of analyses and the statistics we can actually do. Make sure to take a step back and review the Jamovi breakdowns that I did in the video, and I briefly spoke about this stuff, where this looks like a data set that you would see in Jamovi. The three basic elements of the data set have their cases or rows, basically contains data on how each respondent answered the survey. So the rows are to the individuals. Then there's the variables or the fields that contain data on how each respondent answered to a certain question. And the mnemonic or the variable name, basically an abbreviated term for the survey question. It sits on top of each variable field and helps the researcher navigate the database. So each row, record, or case, it's each of these individuals. Usually their name is stripped for confidentiality reasons. We have this column, this variable field, that tells us all the values that could fit under this variable name, this mnemonic of work stat. So I'm not sure what WRK STAT means. Probably work status, whether they're, and I'm only doing that because I'm picking up what they're putting down here on this column. For retired, working, keeping house or keeping home, and so on. As I mentioned before, we don't have 5 years to do survey research right now. That might be what you end up doing post-college. What we can do also, though, to analyze our data is something that's called secondary survey research. And unlike primary data that we collect ourselves, this type of data is research where we take pre-existing data to uncover important patterns within the population. So someone else did the survey data. They constructed a survey, and we're going to take that data, analyze it, and maybe pick up some new things that wasn't discussed prior. We'll be doing that in this class, where we'll be focusing on pre-existing survey data like the general social survey to examine and test our own research questions. The general social survey we will work with is a national database of public opinion that has been asked each year since 1972. We'll focus more on this in Module 2, but you're going to go ahead and go and find one variable and talk about it a little bit for your discussion post this week. Get ready for this adventure. Module 1, get your hands a little bit dirty as you figure out a specific question that seems interesting to you. All of this becomes an exploration of what's called data excavation. It's a foundational step into actual data mining. In data excavation, the term applies when using secondary data. Since the data is already there, the researcher must search the database for interesting variables, survey questions, to start to measure or operationalize their research questions. So we're excavating. We have this big pile of data, and we're trying to pick questions that seem interesting to the questions we have at a social theory level. Be sure to watch the short video on how to use the GSS Data Explorer to search for cool survey questions from the General Social Survey. This week, your blog post and your homework assignment, you'll be required to do all your work with the GSS, just the blog post. Homework assignment is the scavenger hunt a little bit. To do with the GSS data. So make sure to get excited with this stuff and excavating for new variables. The last few slides and second data should be review the slides. If you are familiar with these things, make sure to focus on the video lectures that get you with Jamovi and the GSS, and make sure that this stuff makes sense. So we looked at levels of measurement, categorical versus continuous or numerical, survey data. We have records versus variable fields, so the variable names with the mnemonics with secondary data analysis. And we're starting to do a little bit of data excavation with the GSS Data Explorer. All right, the last piece, or another check your knowledge moment. Take a short break, try it out, and have a good week, folks.